So Jared, welcome. This is the inside the mind of a man. So we'll see how I do at getting your mind out here.
All right.
So I like to start with the warm-up round. Do some kind of stretching.
Okay.
And nothing real difficult.
Like a lightning round, kind
of. Yeah, lightning round. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of this is just gonna be forced choice. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So a good nap or a good movie?
Oh man, that's really hard because I like them both. It's been a long time since I napped, so if I have to go with my inclination, I'll say movie.
All right. Brady or Belichick? Now, for context, you're a New England Patriots fan?
I am, yeah. Okay. Well, it's just that's hard too, because I'm going to say Brady, and yet I'm still a Pats fan with him gone. Some have left the bandwagon, so yeah.
Okay. All right, and another little follow-up. Eli Manning or Bernard Pollard?
I don't know who Pollard is, but him all day. I cannot stand Eli Manning at all. So you put almost anybody else in there.
These are two of the biggest enemies to the Patriots. Pollard's the one that injured Brady ACL in 2017.
Oh, that's right.
Pollard's also the one that injured.
I blocked that from my memory.
Yeah, he's injured 4 Patriots on 3 different opposing teams.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. But Eli Manning is still the...
Eli, that mouth breather. Yeah.
Jesus may forgive him, but you won't. Okay. Would you rather do without, or would you rather owe somebody a favor?
Do without.
Would you rather drive or navigate?
Drive.
Audiobook or music?
Music.
Would you rather be on time or take your time?
Oh, be on time. Yeah.
Okay. So you'd rather do without, drive, and be on time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head, I
guess. Early morning or late night?
Late night.
The mountains or the ocean?
Mountains.
Go for a hike or lay in a hammock?
Lay in a hammock.
All right. And last one, Jordan or LeBron?
Oh, Jordan. Yeah. For sure. Okay. But I'm a Gen Xer, so yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
No. All right. Well, thank you for playing the lightning round.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'll be prizes afterwards.
Okay, good deal.
So, why don't you tell us briefly, how did you come to faith in Christ?
Yeah. Well, as I shared the last night, there's not like an exact moment that I can point to, but there's 2 kind of milestones. I grew up in the church. Grew up in gospel teaching churches. And so there's 2. It was like when I was in kindergarten, I did walk the aisle thing and was baptized shortly thereafter when I was 12 or 13.
You got wet or you got baptized?
I got baptized.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got rebaptized later?
And then I got rebaptized
Your
later.
theology allows for a second?
Well, not now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I wasn't in charge then, so I don't know. Like if I pinpoint, I'm just glad I follow Christ today. But yeah,
it's kind of the frog gets warmed up and cooked in the pot, and I can't tell you what moment.
Actually now I have a lot more sympathy now at 44 for my 5-year-old decision. Looking back, thinking why would I doubt that? Because I never had really a crisis of faith in any sense since then. I didn't know as much then as I did at 12, or even but I know more now than I knew at 12. So, a child can legitimately believe. So I have a lot more sympathy as an older man for my 5-year-old decision than I did when I was, 12 or older. Yeah.
30 seconds on men who might have a 5-year-old orbiting their life, how they would encourage or foster faith in them.
Yeah, well, I think it's important. Like one thing that I wanted to make sure I did with my daughters, especially when they were little, is I want to raise them in the admonition of the Lord, and yet when it comes to that faith decision, I didn't want them to be parroting anything that we said, so we wanted them in some way to initiate those conversations, particularly around baptism. I wanted them to introduce it, but I also wanted them to be able to explain what it meant and not just be aping something that I was kind of saying to them. Yeah. And when I was pastoring, whenever I would have a family that would come and they had a child that would be baptized, depending on usually the age of the child, I'm looking for them to articulate, even in their own words. I'm not looking for advanced theology, but I want them to be able to articulate what I was, what I am, what baptism means, and why I want to be baptized. I think those are things to look for. Is there's a difference between raising your children in the training of righteousness and pressuring them to to replicate your faith or to mimic your faith. So just be able to discern those things, I think, because the Holy Spirit is faithful. He blossoms true faith in us, and so I think even as we're evangelizing our kids, if we're kind of putting the religious screws to them a little bit, we can actually stifle genuine expressions of faith in our kids when we do that. Yeah.
You mentioned your daughters a couple times. Give us a little bit of background on your family, your wife, your kids, how old they are, what do they do?
Yeah, so I'm married to Becky. We'll be married next June, 25 years. So we had 24 years this past June. We have 2 daughters, Macy and Grace. Macy is in her sophomore year of college. She goes to Lancaster Bible College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My younger daughter, Grace, is a senior in high school, so she's making those decisions now about what she wants to do. Becky and I are looking at balancing, wanting to maximize our time with our younger daughter because she wants to leave the nest, and looking forward to an empty nest. Probably me a little bit more than my wife, but we both are actually like really excited about the next season. Yeah.
Tommy Cadis, who's the president.
That's right. Yeah.
He and I went to school together.
Oh, excellent.
Super quality guy.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know him as well as the previous fellow, but I've heard a lot of good things.
Great.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. If you had to give a grade, A through F, I don't know, of your soul, how's your soul?
Oh, wow.
Not performance, I don't know, just maybe.
Yeah.
Or temperature, I don't know, give whatever, however you quantify it.
A grade. Maybe a B- right now. Yeah, I think I'm doing pretty well. I'm coming out of a rough season early this year. But even in the midst of a lot of things that trouble me externally, my family's doing well, and I think the Lord's been very kind to kind of calm me. I can tend to be a very anxious person, and I have felt almost supernaturally calm. But I'm also a very busy guy as well, and that begins to kind of, fray my edges, so to speak. So I'd like to be in that B+ A category, but I think,
We looked at Philippians last night, and it was the part where something bad's happening to Paul, but it really serves to advance the gospel.
Yeah.
Would you say B-, maybe the gospel's advancing because of this difficulty?
Oh, for sure. But at the same time, I don't want to make the mistake of thinking that I've got to be unhealthy for something positive to be coming about. Yeah.
It's helpful. What's your theology of money?
My theology of money.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You're a professor. You have theologies of everything. Right?
Yeah. I think money is a tool. It's a tool like rope. So with rope, you can pull somebody out of a ditch, or you can hang yourself, right? And money is like that. I think of Proverbs 30. In Proverbs 30, there's a little prayer, I think in verse 8, give me neither poverty nor riches. And we totally understand the give me no poverty prayer. But the prayer to say, don't make me, I don't want to be poor, but I don't want to be rich. Give me what I need. There's just too many warnings in the New Testament especially, but also in Proverbs and in the wisdom literature about having a lot of money. It's not a sin, but there's just so much danger wrapped up in it, because the more money you have, the more temptation there is to lean into your own strength. And
The rope you have to hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't sense your need if you have a lot. Yeah.
What blesses you?
Time with my wife, for sure. Yeah, I just love spending time with her.
Would she say the same thing?
I think so, yeah. It feels that way. She wants me home more, so that's not a bad thing, right? Because that guy's like, man, my wife's always on me about being at home. I was like, gosh, would you rather her want someone else there, right? I was like, there's a lot worse things than your wife wanting you around. So yeah, she definitely.
You're away this weekend. How many weekends a year are you gone?
Yeah, this year's been strange just because I had a lot of cancellations of travel because of COVID. But generally, spring and fall are very busy, and it's typically traveling 2 or 3 times a month during that.
Does she resent that?
No, she really enjoys it now, just in the sense that she gets to live kind of vicariously through ministry and kind of see, part of her ministry is being able to support what I'm doing, and then when she gets to travel with me as well, she enjoys that. But I think it was harder for her when I was pastoring and I was also traveling to speak, different places, because a lot of times that would be during the week and fewer weekends. So I limited my weekends away, just so be present with the church. But that meant that I'm there, doing ministry stuff over the weekend. I'm kind of absentee because I'm engaged with church life. And then during the week I would travel, and that was harder for her than now, where I'm home during the week, and a lot of times my travel's on the weekend or thereabouts. Yeah.
How's your marriage these days?
We're doing really well, actually. One of the best seasons that we've enjoyed, despite everything. And part of that is because of COVID. It grounded me, so I had a lot of cancellations. I didn't teach any classes over the summer, so I was pretty much home, for 4 or 5 months straight. And we just were able to spend a lot of time together, and it was really helpful for us.
Have you heard that same testimony from others, that this curse has actually been a blessing in marriages?
From a few, okay. Yeah. I wouldn't say I hear it a lot. Yeah, which could be revealing in and of itself, actually. Yeah, when you're forced into the same environment, you have to face things that maybe you're avoiding otherwise. Have to have conversations you've been avoiding maybe otherwise. So I don't know that it's super common.
As a husband and father, what motivates you?
Oh, wow. As a husband, I would say my wife flourishing in the way the Lord has wired her to be.
What's that look like?
Yeah, so my wife's natural gifting and just her energy so she's a big personality, like extrovert.
Would we like you more if we met her?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm convinced I got hired at my
last church.
Not that we
don't
church.
like you, but...
No. I got hired at my last church because of her, I'm convinced. Like, it was a lot of interviews, and then suddenly she was brought in and it was like, oh yeah, we got to get this guy. Because she... So like she started promising that, so she's from Louisiana, so she was promising like, I'll make you a gumbo, jambalaya, everything. And they're like, all right. And these are like Vermonters, like they don't, food is utilitarian up there. It's not supposed to have flavor. So like she showed up and brought flavor, it was great. Yeah. So, but when we were there, especially, so we're coming out of a long season of local church ministry. Planted a church in Nashville, and then I went to pastor this church in Vermont after that before moving to Kansas City. In both places, my wife had to kind of, very, joyously, but entered into seasons of kind of doing things that she had to do, right? So at the church plant, she had to lead the women's ministry, children's ministry, because it's just all hands on deck, and you just got to do things that you don't necessarily want to do. So she never heard me preach because she was always watching kids. She was just doing a lot of stuff. In Vermont, she had more freedom to kind of, her deal is hospitality, just having people in the house, feeding them, taking care of them. She has a real love for younger couples, to mother them, disciple them, and all that sort of deal. And we just didn't have the resources or the space to do that, so she felt really stifled in that regard. And we're in a season now where we have the resources and the freedom to be able to kind of exercise our gifts. Yeah. So I've just watched her kind of like blossom and enjoy this. This is what I was put on earth to do. And man, that just like fires me up, because it's not just that she's happy, but she's happy being her and not feeling like she's got to fit a particular mold or run in a particular lane that's not really, hers to run in.
Is that part of wise husbandry, to seek the flourishing of your wife?
I think it's Peter, right, who says, live with your wife in an understanding way. And
that doesn't just mean, yes, whatever you want.
Yeah, the natural way, or the surface way that we take that is that we're sympathetic, or which is good, right? But I think I've taken it to mean like be a student of my wife. I live with her. Like I want to understand what makes her tick, what makes her feel loved, how she flourishes. And then I want to be able to somehow support that, to feed that, because I want her to be the best her that she can be. And yeah, I think that's part of good husbanding. Yeah.
What gets in the way of a man being a student of a woman?
Probably a million things. I mean, besides just our own self-interest, sometimes a wonky theology, right? Or a misapplication of a good theology. Men are the leader of the home. The Lord has established men as the head of the home. That's good biblical theology. Sometimes the way that we apply that is to say, well, you're just kind of the supporting cast here, and it becomes more about self-interest and self-exaltation. And you're the helpmeet. You just exist. You're like my sidekick, you know.
I'm the hero.
Yeah. And I think that just goes to some really wonky places where people don't feel cared for and loved. But to see, it's like I begin to see my wife. She doesn't want the role that I have, but she wants to feel like she's a part of the team. That we're facing things together. I think understanding that has been really key. Yeah. For my kids, the big thing, I just want them to know and love Jesus. And I've tried not to think like you got to think like me. You have to like all the same stuff that I like. And sometimes I get a little. I see them interested in a particular thing. Not a simple thing, but it's just something that I think, I don't know about that, or that just makes me a little uncomfortable because it's outside. But I just keep coming back to, do they love Jesus? Are they engaged in the church? My daughter going to Pennsylvania, that was the chief thing that I was, concerned about. I knew she would, that she would be interested in having a good education, and she was pursuing that. But I just thought I want her to be involved in a local church. Where she's known and she can be pastored and she can use her gifts, and knowing that that was a priority for her right away, I felt like, okay, as a proud dad moment, I'm more proud of that than certain grades that she might be getting. Yeah.
What fear rises to the top with respect to your wife or with your girls?
Yeah,
That might motivate you.
Yeah, I mean, from my wife, it's just simply that she'd be unhappy, I guess. I know it's kind of a plain vanilla answer, but I want my wife to be happy in the Lord. I want her to be happy with me. Mm-hmm. I want her to be happy in life, and so wives women set the mood of the home, don't they? Right? Like when mama's happy, nobody's happy. Like that's a real thing, And so, but sometimes it's like we're surprised when that happens. Like we haven't been feeding her joy, and then we're shocked that she doesn't have any joy. And so I want to be attuned to my own responsibility in that. But yeah, I want my wife to look forward to getting up in the morning. I want her to be happy to be my wife. And I think similar with my kids right now, the stage of life that they're in. I want them to be healthy. I want them to, if it's the Lord's will for them to be married, I want them to find godly, men to lead them. And so it's just kind of the natural kind of, I wouldn't call them fears necessarily, but just the things, all right, these are the things that I'm really praying about and kind of occupied with. Yeah, because of the stage of life that they're in.
When they were younger, were the fears different?
Yeah, it was probably more about safety and to a large extent, that they would grow up not weird because they grew up pastors' kids. Yeah.
Pastor, church planner, those are other ones. You guys homeschool also?
No, we didn't.
No trifecta. Okay.
No, they were public schooled until we moved.
All due respect to our homeschool family.
Yeah. No, but it was a real concern because I didn't grow up. I grew up a church kid, but I didn't grow up in a pastor's family, so I didn't have any experience with being a pastor's kid or anything like that. But I knew enough to know, this can go sideways. So I wanted to be really careful about what kind of expectations I put on my kids, that they didn't, have undue pressure to feel like that you have to represent me, or you got to have all the right answers, or you got to. And what I learned from my older daughter, especially, because I remember having conversations with her about it, is look, I want y'all to know, you just need to be you, and don't feel like you have to. I mean, it's a good motivation to have your home life be God-fearing and joyous as well, because I didn't want them to feel like they had to go to church and pretend that, everything's fine at home if it's not, or whatever. I just never wanted to have them have to carry, secrecy or just the pressure of, I got to be the pastor's daughter. And so I'm constantly having conversations with them about that. You don't have to perform for them or for me. And she said, Dad, this is when she was a little older. She said, Dad, you guys didn't, do that for me, but it's just there. You're sitting in a Sunday school class and they will say things like, oh, you probably already know this because you're the pastor's daughter. And then you feel bad if you don't know it, or you feel like she said, I feel like I'm betraying you or misrepresent or making you look bad if I don't know it, because then it's like, oh, my dad didn't teach me this or something like that. The pressure is just there. So I had concerns about my kids, being embittered about the church. So if my wife and I had concerns, there's conflict or something going on in the church, we would never discuss that in front of our children, because I just didn't want to do anything to put them sideways against the family of God. So that would probably be, as they were growing up, one of my big concerns was just, let them not, grow up thinking, I don't want to have anything to do with that place or this thing, because my parents aren't the real deal, and church is a place where, you can't be yourself.
Let me shift gears a little bit. You travel good fair amount. You're going to North Carolina after this.
Yeah.
You get to see, at least some layer of the church in America.
Yeah.
So two things. What concerns you and what excites you about the church in America?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think something that I've been occupied with over the last, 15 years or so in terms of my concern for the church is really pragmatism and consumerism, particularly in the church in the West and in the United States specifically. Consumerism and pragmatism, and kind of what's manifested as the attractional church, what we used to call the seeker church, kind of the attractional church model, which has failed.
Which you wrote a book about.
Yeah, I've written a few books
addressing.
about, there's a discipleship deficit there. So in the beginning, the motivation was very sincere, which is lost people need to know Jesus, which is a great motivation. But somehow along the way, we switched from just making, it started off stunted because it was basically, we're about making converts. Jesus didn't say go into the world and make converts. He said make disciples. So we neglected the latter part of it, growing people up in the faith, or a fully fledged conversion into the life of Christ. But then somewhere along the way, even that shifted to where the gospel got saved for special occasions, and it just became about kind of inspirational moral uplift. And the consequence has been, I think, disastrous for Christianity in the West. We do not have disciples of Jesus. We have people who send their religious avatars to church on Sunday, but live a completely different life. The pragmatism, we've reinforced kind of an individualistic.
Is that nationwide?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Northeast, where there's no advantage to say I'm a Christian. That's same as in the Southeast, where maybe an advantage.
Yeah. There's differences in terms of what churches are growing and not. But even there's exceptions even to that, I think. So even I pastored in Vermont, which when I was there was the least church state in the nation. That might not be true, 6 years later, but that time it was. Highest concentration of people who identify as no religion at all, none religion. And the churches that were growing were churches that were faithfully preaching the word, and which is just not what you would expect. You think, man, you got to reach lost people, you got to do the seeker stuff.
Don't offend them.
That's right. And that doesn't work there. We saw people coming up from the South, who would try to do kind of the plug and play, seeker church stuff, and it just didn't work. But, there was, a guy who planted a church kind of like that in a college town, and it did work, but he was reaching a particular demographic. So I think really it's dominant throughout, and it's become the dominant mode of evangelicalism. Like your church is an anomaly, and you probably know that, but the dominant mode of evangelicalism, where, in the Bible Belt, but I think all over, is this kind of individualistic, attractional, pragmatic thing. The result is we don't think about the world in Christian ways. So what concerns me this year is all the division and the hostility and even stuff that infiltrates in terms of the church, how are we going to do church during COVID, all that kind of deal. But even how we look outside, it's all driven by individualistic, consumeristic, pragmatic means, and not a means of of discipleship. So we're reaping what we have sown.
The church is reaping.
The church is reaping what it has sown. Yeah. And so that my concern is at a time where the world has always needed Jesus, right? But in the last several years and coming to a head this year, where they could see the Church of Jesus Christ as a picture of an alternate reality with the aroma of heaven. I mean, they've needed us now more than ever to seem different, and we don't seem different. That's my perception, and I'm speaking broadly. There's obviously exceptions, but I think by and large, I think the church is failing. It's failing its witness. That's my concern.
You've stated you feel God's pleasure when you write.
Yeah.
That's a large part of what you do for a living.
Yeah.
Should we feel God's pleasure from our work? Or is that just a couple guys, this guy who ran track and you only two get to do that?
That's right, Eric Little and me.
Yeah.
Those are the only two. The answer is yes, but I don't know that we should expect it to feel a certain way. So there are things where, when you feel God's pleasure, what I mean by that is this is how God has wired me to be and what he's gifted me to do. And therefore, it doesn't make it easy, but it makes the work, it feels fruitful to me. It is a joy to me to do. Now, I've worked jobs that were not in line with that, right? It's a job. And so I think I don't want to say, no matter what job you're in, even if you hate it, you're supposed to feel God's pleasure in it, right? Because there are guys, they're doing things like, this is just what I have to do to provide for my family. This is what I do to be productive. This is what I do to obey God's call. If a man doesn't work, he shall not eat. But work itself is good. So it may not be what you're wired to do or you feel gifted to do or you're not flourishing there. It's not your dream job. And so you don't feel God's pleasure that way. But I think to know that you are obeying the command to take dominion and to be a provider and not to be, you're rebelling against the drift to be lazy. I think you can feel God's pleasure in just the obedience to those commands. In the same way, like I hate mowing my yard. I hate it.
How do you feel about it?
I hate it.
Yeah.
I like mowing more than like the weed eating, right?
Okay, that's.
Yeah, I hate weed eating. Mowing's okay, I guess.
Is there anything that's below hedge trimming? Or?
Like pulling the weeds.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
That's the worst.
That's the
But
hierarchy
I
of
hate
yard
messing
care.
with the trimmer. I hate it. Hate edging, all of that. And I mainly do it because, I'm in a competition with the guy next door, right?
Best yard?
He hates it more than I do. So my yard always looks good compared to his. But I'm losing the guy across the street, who I think is avoiding things inside the house because he's out like every 3 days he's mowing his yard. And the grass does not grow that quick in Kansas City. But he's out there. So I hate it. But when it's done, and I can sit on the back deck, right? And I got some iced tea and a cigar, and I'm looking at what there's pleasure in a task that's completed, and you're wiping the sweat off, and it's done. And there's something nice when you're cutting the rows, and the difference between the cut grass and you see that there's progress, and so I hate it, but there's God's pleasure in just subduing the earth, right? We're going to have to do it by the sweat of our brow. It's gonna be thorns and thistles, but God's commanded us to do it, and I think we can feel pleasure in those things. Yeah.
Do you have experience with anxiety or depression?
Yes, I do.
That's a loaded.
Which is
tell.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's depression. Not so much lately, but
Should we be surprised at that a pastor, a church planner,
No.
you never get anxiety, never
No.
depressed?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Or would you say, the
Doesn't
Bible's
sound very
full of
spiritual.
this?
The Bible certainly. Psalm 42 is one of my favorites. The psalmist there, he wants to die. I just want to come before your presence. My soul is panting for this. I feel like every time I get my head above water, another wave crashes down. All your waves are crashing on me. I feel that very keenly. I went through a significant period of depression 15 years or so ago, suicidal ideation and everything. And I think, it wasn't clinically diagnosed or anything like that. Pretty sure somewhat, largely circumstantial, not somewhat. My marriage was broken. I just wanted to be done. Everything that I wanted to do had been kind of yanked out from me. And it was all the rotten fruit of my own sin. It wasn't like these things are being thrust on me. It's like I created this situation, and now I'm living in this wreckage. And I just wanted to die. I've had shades of that since then, but not anything as significant as that. At my last pastorate, I had a few bouts with what I would consider a kind of depression, but not to that extent. Anxiety is an interesting thing for me because so earlier this year, I had what I thought was a heart attack. It was in January.
Did you go on WebMD and started looking up?
No, but I did go. I went to the doctor. I mean,
Okay.
I was sitting waiting to speak at a student conference that we were having there at the seminary, and just watching the previous guy on the live stream before it was my turn to go out, and I just felt like what I'd never felt before. Like my body was shutting down. I felt like everything was just like your body's logging off, kind of. I felt like I was about to die, and my heart rate was soaring. And so I went outside, and one of the security guard who, because I was just getting worse, he saw me. He was actually one of my ministry residents from the church. So he recognized right away something wasn't right. He called 911. Paramedics came. Long story short, I didn't go to the doctor with them because I started feeling a little more stable. My wife came and got me. Went to the doctor next day. They looked, put you in the tube, looked at the heart, all that sort. They did all the whole deal. They said, "Don't think you had a heart attack. We think it was an anxiety-induced panic attack." Which that was the first time. That wasn't a total surprise to me because beginning when I was pastoring in Vermont, I started having these flashes of panic in driving situations, always in driving. I feel like I'm about to lose control or I'm coming out of my body. And it's usually if I'm like driving really fast, like on the interstate, or it's real crowded, or there's bad weather. What didn't always happen, right? So it's not every time I'm doing in that situation, but it just would pop up in those situations. So when they said that, I just thought, I'd never felt it not driving. So just the fact that I was sitting there. So it's weird to say like you struggle with anxiety because everybody wanted to know like what were you doing when that happened? Were you nervous about speaking? I was like, no, wasn't nervous about speaking. Did somebody say something that made you angry? See something on social media that made you angry? I was like, no. What were you doing? I literally was just sitting there.
The trigger was I was a human.
I was a human being.
Yeah.
And I look back and it's a busyness. This is why I think COVID was a severe mercy for me. Because I was coming off a very busy season and I basically worked kind of 4 jobs. So I'm writing and I'm traveling and speaking. I'm a prof at the seminary. I lead a residency program at my church, and I'm trying to be a good husband and father. So you put all that together, and it's depleting, for me. When I was pastoring, I could see what was taking the toll as well, as we had a very significant period of suffering in the church. So the last 3 years of my pastorate, I was burying one friend after another, and so I'm almost every week at somebody's bedside, mainly cancer. As soon as we'd get somebody in the ground, another body, would get sick. And then there was some conflict at the tail end, and I'm just coming out like there's, some point you're just absorbing all of this, and I'm not the guy who's like gonna be from the pulpit just, bearing their, everything and like, airing grievances with everybody and everything. You just store it all up, and after a while your body just goes, can't do it anymore. So that's kind of weird, like in terms of like anxiety. I don't worry about particular things, right? My wife probably wishes I would worry about more things, because I'm pretty I'm a laid back guy, so to speak. But it's just the nature of busyness that just kind of, I start to store that up. That's where the anxiety comes from.
How should men rest in the peace that the gospel provides? We've talked about the gospel lens a couple times here.
I think it's probably different for every man, but a lot of it just has to do with understanding that that Christ is your validation. And if you're hidden with him in God, as Paul writes in Colossians, that you don't have anything that you need to hide anymore. You can come out from hiding. We're going to talk about that tonight, actually. You can come out from hiding. You don't have to prove anything. I mean, everyone else thinks you got to prove something to them, and you have responsibilities. But the most important thing about you is settled. The debt against you is canceled. You're adopted by the Father according to what the Son has done for you. And if that's where we need to rest, because we have such a performance mentality, a do I have what it takes kind of mentality. And some of that is just part of being a man, and some of it is part of what the culture thinks a man should be. And a lot of those things we need to bring the message of grace into, because they're not things even the Lord sometimes demands of us. Sad to say.
We need to remind ourselves of that often.
Oh, every day.
Daily.
Every day, yeah. I think as early as you can in the morning, your first waking moments, whatever you can do to set your mind on the good news, it really will affect or impact how you do the rest of the day.
We got time for one or two more here.
Okay.
I've heard you say that as you become more spiritually mature, you also become more emotionally mature.
Yeah.
Say something about that?
Yeah.
And I don't want to push any corollaries where if you don't grow spiritually, you're going to keep making the same emotional overreactions.
Yeah, but I think we can come close to saying that.
Okay.
So if you're looking at, biblically, how do we know someone is a mature believer, right? What are the measurements? And you can go wonky with measurements, but what are the measurements for that if we're going to look there? Well, you look at Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit. That's probably the most obvious place to look. So if you have the indwelling power of the Holy Spirit, you're following Christ, over time, you are growing in what? Peace, patience, goodness, self-control.
I memorized it when I was 11.
Yeah,
Love,
right.
joy, peace, patience,
Kindness.
goodness, kindness,
Yes.
faithfulness, gentleness, self-control.
Right. And what's interesting about that list is Paul contrasts, that is a contrast to a list of behaviors. Okay. So the mindset on the flesh, and he's listing like sexual immoralities and different things that we do that are sinful. But he doesn't list things that we do that are spiritual. He lists things that we are. And that are incredibly hard to fake. Because imagine if it just said, and the fruit of the Spirit is studying your Bible every day, praying every morning or 3 times a day, going to church every Sunday, all of which are good things and have biblical, basis to them. But it says things that you and I can't fake it. And there are things that, I guess you could refer to them as emotional maturity. I think I would, because it's a holistic expression of personhood, that I'm gentle with you, that I'm kind towards you, that I'm self-control. I'm able to control myself, my temper, my sexual attractions. I'm able to control those things. And as the more I walk with Christ and the more closely I walk with Him, the more I'm able to control those things. Those are all signs of emotional maturity, I think.
Your wife has known you for
30
almost
years. Yeah.
A little while.
Yeah.
How has she experienced Holy Spirit change in you in the fruit of the Spirit? What would she say? Yep, that's an example of maturity that Spirit's done.
Yeah.
And I got to see it over these decades.
Yeah, I think that, the big one is just in the reconciliation of us, the restoration of my marriage, which was a hard, fought war for both of us, almost independent of each other. So the culmination of my unrepentance and my sin, which was largely indulged in pornography and all the things that does relationally. It just rewires your brain. It stunts all of that. It stunts emotional maturity. Almost all down the line. It makes you less kind. It makes you less gentle. It's certainly less self-control, et cetera, et cetera. To the point where she's like, I don't want to be married to you anymore. You're not who I thought you were. I don't want anything to do with you.
She said those.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I spent a year living in the guest bedroom of our home, and just wanting to kill myself, but also praying in a way that I'd never prayed before. Face down on the floor type prayers, God help me prayers, I don't know what to do prayers. And the Lord changed my heart.
He didn't give up on you and say, oh, you screwed it up.
No, and that was the most startling thing about it, and why I'm so, this gospel deal is the only deal going today, is because there was a night He reached into the room and grabbed hold of me and said, I love you and I approve of you, and It wasn't anything new that I'd never heard before, but it was like
Or that you even preached before.
yeah,
or,
it was like I'd heard it for the first time. And it was like the lights came. You remember like the parable of the prodigal son in the pigsty? It says he came to himself, or he came to his senses. It's like that, like I came to myself. But my wife, it wasn't like the next day I go, good news, God approves of me. And she's, couldn't do that. And she's going to be like, that's fine, I don't,
I'm moving back in.
Yeah.
Move over.
That's right.
The bed's half mine.
No.
Yeah.
But so it was a year, that whole span. So like I'm walking in repentance, basically. I'm a different person. She doesn't care. It's too late. It's over. I have the prospect of divorce like hanging over my head constantly, but yet I have a joy and an energy that I don't know where it's coming from. And I'm kind of like the worst thing that I thought, like losing her was like the worst thing I could imagine. That reminder in that guest bedroom was like, that's terrible and that is traumatic. That's not the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing that can happen to you is dying after you die. That's the worst thing. And that's settled. That will never happen. And so I was able to love her for the first time in a very selfless way. Not like there was no response. So a lot of times we're loving based on how they're going to respond to us, and if they don't, then we stop, which proves we don't really love. We're just in it for the reciprocation. So I'm just loving every day with nothing and with no hope that it's going to change. I mean, I have a hope that it'll change, but there's no indication that it will. And it came to a head on a Friday morning, about a year through this whole deal. One morning she just said, I want you out of the house. I thought, this is the word. Like, I've been investing now in this, and I just thought, oh, okay. I said, can you just give me the weekend, figure out where I'm going to go, and if you still want me gone Monday, I'll leave. And she said, yeah, that's fine. She went to work. I called my dad, just trying to get some advice and some counsel. And lunchtime, she calls me, and she said, I don't know what the deal is. I don't want you to leave. I know that you're different. And I don't know what that means, but I'm willing to, to figure it out. And what she says now is that was like the last she knew I had changed. She knew
Friday
that
morning.
was on Friday.
Don't be here when I get back.
Right.
Okay, you can stay. And lunchtime she calls.
And lunchtime she calls and says, let's figure it out. But what she would say now is that Friday morning was like her. It was like the last. No, it's too late. Like I know you're different, but you've caused me too much hurt. I don't care. Right. It's like she's trying to stiff arm. The Lord began to stitch us together from that moment. Now we're on the same page. Like nothing can stop a man and wife on the same page. We want the same things. I almost know if you've done, I'm sure you've done, marriage counseling as I have as well. That's the first question I ask. Do you want the same thing? Because we're just spinning our wheels. If one of y'all wants divorce and the other one doesn't, I can almost not help you. But if you both want to stay married, we can begin working through some of these issues are. It doesn't mean, everything's going to be happy and fun. But if one of you wants out, then it's almost pointless to be meeting with you, except to plead with you, right? So we were on the same page, and the Lord began to stitch us together. She would say now, for sure, I'm a much more gentle man, I'm much more kind, and then just all of the things that come with that turnaround. The Lord has been very kind and very gracious to me, and I do think she would say, you're not who you were 15 years ago. Yeah.
I want to end with this, and so for guys who are thinking, how do I get God to reach down and make me come to myself? You got a sentence or two?
Well, you can't make God do anything. And I don't want the lesson to the story to be you do a certain thing and you'll get, all your stuff back. You'll get, that was not the lesson Job learned. Right? Job, all his stuff was restored to him, except, he couldn't get his kids back. But he didn't know that. He didn't know if I just do these things and believe the right way and say the right thing, like he wasn't a prosperity gospelist. I'm going to get all this stuff back. That's prosperity gospel thinking. If I just obey right, I'll have everything that I want. And that wasn't the trick for me either. I had to get to the point like I've lost it all and I'm probably not getting it back. God, you got to help me. And it wasn't God saying, I'm going to give everything back to you. It was saying, you've lost everything but me. And because I'm with you, you have everything that you need. That was the difference. And so the Lord in his kindness blessed me with a restored marriage. But if he didn't, I still would be okay. I probably wouldn't be here talking to you.
Not about
but
that.
Right, but I would be okay.
Yeah.
I'd be more than okay because I have Jesus. That's the lesson. So you can't orchestrate any kind of dramatic thing. I call that moment my gospel wakefulness. But it's like revival, right? You don't get it by putting it on a sign. You don't tell the Holy Spirit, hey, we're having a revival next week. And oh, is that when it is? I'll be, it's like, let me put it on my calendar, right?
Right.
It doesn't work that way. And it's the same with us. Like, we can't orchestrate that. But in your brokenness, you can put yourself in the crosshairs of God's grace by knowing that he is with you and will never leave you or forsake you. And at the moment when perhaps everyone else has turned away from you, he will not. And that's all I know to do, is just to cry out to him in those moments.
If you have Jesus, you will be okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
More than okay. Yeah.
More than okay.
Yeah.
Brother, thanks. This is enjoyed it thoroughly. Helpful for us. I want to thank you. Yeah.